Have you ever had a friend who does nothing but complain about their awful job, the insane hours, the terrible pay, the soul-crushing stress, and then you watch them leap to the company's defense the second someone else criticizes it? Or maybe you've seen it on a bigger scale. People living in genuinely unfair situations, people who are obviously getting the short end of the stick, somehow become the most passionate defenders of the very system that's holding them there. It feels completely backwards. It goes against every rational instinct we think we have. You'd assume that if a system is hurting you, the natural response is to fight it, to demand change, or to burn it all down. And yet, we see the opposite all the time in others, and if we're being honest, maybe even in ourselves. It's a stubborn, quiet, and sometimes ferocious defense of the very structures that keep us stuck. But what if this isn't a glitch in our logic? What if it's not weakness or a lack of smarts? What if it's a deep-seated, incredibly powerful survival mechanism kicking into high gear? Today, we're re-exploring the unsettling psychological reason why people will instinctively defend the very systems that cause them pain. It's a theory that, once you get it, will fundamentally change how you see the world, from political debates and office politics to huge social inequalities. It has a concept that shines a light on one of the most profound paradoxes of the human mind. This baffling behavior has a name: System Justification Theory. And understanding it is the key to unlocking why a bad, familiar reality often feels safer than the promise of a better, unknown future. To really get this, let's stop talking theory and start talking story. I want you to meet Alex. Alex isn't one person, but he's built from thousands of real stories. He's a brilliant graphic designer at a prestigious, award-winning agency. From the outside, Alex has totally made it. The company name on his resume is a golden ticket, but Alex's actual life, it's a grind. His day starts before sunrise and ends long after sunset. And the salary, when you break it down by the hour, it's barely above minimum wage. The pressure is suffocating. Every project is an emergency. Every deadline is a threat. And the feedback from senior partners is often just brutal. The office culture basically hands out medals for burnout. Sleep is for the weak, they joke, but the dark circles under everyone's eyes tell the real story of chronic exhaustion. Alex's health is tanking. He's got constant anxiety, he can't sleep, and his friendships are strained because he's never really there. His brain is permanently logged into his work email. On the rare Friday night he escapes to see old friends, Alex unloads. He talks about the impossible standards, the total lack of respect, the feeling of being a cog in a machine that's grinding him to dust. His friends are horrified. "Alex, you have to quit," they plead. "This is exploitation. They're using you." And right on cue, the paradox kicks in. The second his friends call it exploitative, Alex's whole demeanor changes. He gets defensive. "No, you don't get it," he shoots back. "This is a top-tier agency. You have to pay your dues. The experience I'm getting is priceless." When a friend pushes, "But they're not treating you right," Alex snaps. It's a tough industry. It weeds out the people who don't want it badly enough. This is how you earn your spot at the top. In the span of a minute, Alex has gone from being the system's victim to its #1 fan. He stopped complaining about his suffering and started justifying it as a necessary, even noble, rite of passage. Why? Why would someone so clearly being harmed by a system rush to protect it? Alex is smart and self-aware. Logically, his reaction makes zero sense. But psychologically, it makes perfect sense. This is our first brush with a famous concept, cognitive dissonance. First described by Leon Festinger way back in 1957. Cognitive dissonance is that awful mental static we feel when we hold to contradictory beliefs at the same time, or when our actions clash with our beliefs. Alex is drowning in dissonance. On one hand, he believes, "I am a smart, capable person who makes good choices." On the other, he's living the reality, My job is making me miserable, sick, and broke. These two ideas are at war, and living in that state of conflict is mentally exhausting. So the brain, in its sneaky, subconscious way, tries to find peace. Alex has two real options. He could change his behavior, quit his job, but that's terrifying. It means jumping into the unknown, facing financial risk, and maybe even admitting he failed. Or he can change his belief. He can reframe the suffering. Suddenly, it's not pointless misery anymore. It's paying his dues. The low pay isn't exploitation. It's an investment in his future. That toxic culture isn't abusive. It's a crucible that forges the best designers. By defending the system, Alex isn't really defending his company. He's defending his ego. He's defending the idea that his suffering has a purpose, that his choices were smart, and that he is not a fool for putting up with it. But cognitive dissonance is just the first layer. To understand why we defend not just our own bad jobs, but entire social, political, and economic systems, we have to zoom out and look at the master program running in the background, System Justification Theory. In 1994, social psychologists John Jast and Mahzarin Banaji introduced a theory to solve a puzzle that had stumped psychologists for years. Why do people, especially those in disadvantaged groups, often defend the very status quo that holds them down? They called it System Justification Theory. They proposed that alongside our need to feel good about ourselves, ego justification, and our tribe group justification, we have a third, equally powerful drive to feel good about the overarching systems we live in. We are wired to see our world, our society, our economy, our government as fundamentally good, fair, and stable. This instinct isn't a product of rational thought. It's a deep, often unconscious need that props up three pillars of our psychological survival. First, it feeds our epistemic needs, our craving for certainty, order, and a predictable world. Our brains are pattern-finding machines that evolved in a world full of random danger. From a survival standpoint, a predictable lion is better than a random one. A stable, known system, even if it's unfair, gives us a mental map. We know the rules, we know who's in charge, and we can guess what tomorrow might look like. Radical change, even for the better, is terrifying because it erases that map and unleashes chaos. The author Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar." System justification is exactly that. It's choosing the lumpy, uncomfortable chair you know over a new one you've never tried. Defending the status quo makes the world feel less random, and that satisfies a deep need to keep uncertainty at bay. Second, it serves our existential needs, our need for security and the sense of control. The idea that the systems running our lives are unfair or chaotic is existentially terrifying. It suggests we're helpless, just leaves in an unjust storm. To protect ourselves from that dread, we're motivated to believe in a just world, the idea that, generally, people get what they deserve. If the system is fair, then my struggles aren't random cosmic jokes. They're tests I can pass with hard work and grit. It gives us back a sense of control, even if that control is an illusion. For someone in a tough spot, the system is fair, and I can make it if I try hard enough, is a far more manageable belief than the system is rigged, and nothing I do matters. One inspires you to get up in the morning, the other invites crippling despair. Third, it fulfills our relational needs, the desperate need to belong. We're social creatures. We thrive in groups, and group glue is made of shared beliefs and a shared reality. To agree that our way of life is good and right is to keep the social peace. Challenging the system, on the other hand, means risking social suicide. It means being the one who argues with your family at Thanksgiving, the one who alienates your neighbors and colleagues. It means being the difficult one, the troublemaker. That social friction is incredibly costly. So, Defending the system is often just an act of social self-preservation. It keeps us in good standing with our tribe. Now, here's where the theory gets really wild. Justin Bonoji said, "We have these three motives constantly wrestling inside us. Feel good about me ego, feel good about my group, and feel good about the system. For people with power and privilege, these three motives sing in perfect harmony. The system is fair, system justification. My group and I are at the top of it, group justification. Therefore, I deserve to be here, ego justification." It's a beautiful, self-esteem boosting feedback loop. But for people in disadvantaged positions, these motives are in a painful, head-on collision. Their daily life screams that they're struggling, a hit to the ego, and that their group is at the bottom, a hit to group esteem. To fix this internal conflict, they face a choice. They can reject the system as unfair, which would save their ego, "I'm not failing, the system is rigged against us." Or they can accept the system as fair, counterintuitively. That second option is often the path of least psychological resistance. Why? Because fighting the system takes a colossal amount of mental and emotional energy. It means living in a constant state of anger and frustration. But justifying the system, that offers a strange kind of peace. It works like a psychological painkiller. The reason system justification is so seductive, especially for those it hurts the most, is because it has what psychologists call a palliative function. It's like a dose of morphine. It doesn't fix the broken leg, but it dulls the agony of living with it. By explaining away inequality and framing the status quo as fair, it takes the edge off of negative emotions. Think about it. If you truly believe the system is just, then things like poverty and discrimination are no longer infuriating moral failures. They become the natural result of some people having more talent or drive. Research shows that people who strongly believe the economic system is fair have weaker stress responses when they see images of inequality, like homelessness. They just don't get as upset, because their belief system gives them a comforting story that explains it all away. But this emotional numbness comes at a terrible and unequal price. For high-status groups, justifying the system is a psychological superpower. It lets them see their success not as a result of luck or privilege, but as something they earned in a fair fight. This belief jacks up their self-esteem, boosts their life satisfaction, and shields them from feeling guilty about the very inequalities that benefit them. Research backs this up. For the privileged, system justification is linked to better mental health. For low-status groups, that same psychological tool becomes a Trojan horse. Sure, it offers short-term relief from anger, but it does so by making them internalize the blame. If the system is fair and you're at the bottom, what does that say about you? The logical and devastating conclusion is that it must be your fault. This can lead to a shocking effect called outgroup favoritism, where members of a disadvantaged group actually start to adopt the negative stereotypes about their own people and show a preference for the dominant group. They might start to see their own community as lazy or less intelligent, while seeing the successful group just naturally more competent. This is the system's ideology being fully downloaded into the minds of those it oppresses. This palliative effect creates a cruel paradox. The very people with the most reasons to fight the system are often the most psychologically motivated to defend it, because they have the most pain to soothe. But that defense corrodes their self-esteem over the long run. They are trading their self-worth for a sense of stability. It's a short-term psychological win for a long-term psychological loss. A classic example is the use of complementary stereotypes, like poor but happy or rich but miserable. These ideas create a fake sense of balance, suggesting that every disadvantage is offset by some hidden advantage. If the poor have the gift of simple happiness, then their lack of money doesn't seem so unfair, right? These narratives are powerful system-justifying tools because they make inequality feel less harsh. And the wildest part, this all happens unconsciously. People aren't deliberately choosing to sabotage themselves. They're just following a powerful, innate drive to reduce their anxiety. They are seeking psychological shelter in the belief that the world makes sense, even as that belief comes at their own expense. This explains why mountains of data about inequality often fail to change minds. You're not just arguing with an opinion, you're arguing with someone's deep-seated need for emotional safety. If system justification is the engine keeping the status quo chugging along, then money is its high-octane fuel. Money is so much more than just currency. It's one of the most powerful psychological symbols we have. It screams success, merit, and the logic of the entire capitalist system. Because of that, its presence or even just the thought of it dramatically affects our tendency to defend that system. Psychological experiments have found something pretty startling. Even tiny, subconscious reminders of money can change how we see the world. In some studies, people who were just incidentally shown pictures of cash or even unscrambled sentences with money-related words started acting differently. They became more individualistic, less helpful to others, and more focused on personal choice. But most importantly, these money primes crank up system-justifying beliefs. Just being exposed to the concept of money can automatically trigger a free market mindset. It makes people more likely to agree that society is a competition, that success comes purely from individual talent, and that inequality is a perfectly natural outcome. This effect plays out differently depending on how much money you actually have. It locks in support for the system from both the top and the bottom, but for completely different reasons. Let's start with the folks at the top. For high-income individuals, their wealth gives them a real, tangible sense of control and higher life satisfaction. According to research, this feeling of control is a powerful psychological bridge. The logic goes, I have a lot of control over my life, and I'm happy. I got here by playing by the rules. Therefore, the system must be fair. Their personal success becomes proof of the system's legitimacy. They don't need to justify the system to cope. They justify it because their life story confirms it's great. This is supercharged by other known effects of wealth. Study after study, including the famous rigged Monopoly game experiment, has shown that as people get richer, they tend to become less empathetic and more willing to bend ethical rules. Wealth can psychologically insulate the rich, making it harder for them to see or feel the inequalities they benefit from. For them, justifying the system is a comfortable, self-congratulatory process. Now, let's flip the coin and look at low-income individuals. For them, it's a whole different story. Poverty and financial insecurity create a constant feeling of threat and a disadvantaged mindset. This chronic stress amplifies that basic human need for stability. When your own life feels chaotic and out of your hands, the need for a stable outside world becomes even more desperate. The result is that low-income individuals often show a more direct and potent form of system justification. For them, the logic isn't the system works for me, so it's fair. It's the system is all I have, so I must believe it's fair to keep a sense of order and hope. It is a raw coping mechanism. Trying to challenge a system you're completely dependent on feels like soaring off the branch you're sitting on. Ironically, the very feeling of powerlessness increases their deference to the system. This creates a tragic feedback loop. The condition of being poor magnifies the psychological need to believe in the fairness of the system that is making you poor. It's a mechanism that kills dissent before it can even start. The wealthy person and the low-wage worker might both defend the same economic system, the first out of self-praise, the second out of a desperate need for psychological shelter. System justification theory isn't just a cool idea in a textbook. It's a force that actively shapes our world in real, and often heartbreaking, ways. Once you have the blueprint, you start seeing its fingerprints everywhere in our politics, our jobs, and our deepest social divides. Let's start with politics. One puzzle for political scientists is why many low-income voters consistently back policies that seem to run against their own economic interests, like deregulation or tax cuts for the super-rich. From a purely rational standpoint, it's baffling. But through the lens of SJT, it starts to make sense. For many, a vote isn't just a cold calculation of personal gain. It's an expression of identity and a statement about how society should work. Supporting policies that reinforce the system is a way of showing faith in that system, whether it is capitalism, the nation, or a traditional social order. It's a vote for stability over chaos, a vote that says, I believe the system is fundamentally sound, even if I'm struggling right now. That psychological comfort can be a more powerful motivator than a few extra bucks. It also helps explain our ideological divides. Researchers note that system justification is strongly linked with political conservatism, which values tradition, stability, and individual responsibility, all deeply system-justifying ideas. In contrast, progressive ideologies, which are about critiquing systemic inequality and pushing for structural change, are inherently system-challenging. Our political leanings, then, aren't just opinions. They're rooted in our deep psychological needs for either stability or change. Next, look at the workplace. The story of Alex is a perfect snapshot of what we now call hustle culture. In many industries, especially tech, finance, and creative fields, a culture of insane overwork isn't seen as a labor issue. It's treated as a badge of honor. Employees justify burnout by calling it passion, justify low pay as paying dues, and justify toxic environments by calling them elite and meritocratic. This is system justification on a corporate scale. It is psychologically easier to believe you are part of a special tribe of high achievers than to admit your hard work is being exploited for someone else's profit. The company's mission becomes a shiny ideology that papers over the cracks of burnout. Defending that culture, even as it destroys you, protects the belief that your sacrifice means something. Finally, SJT shows up in our deepest social hierarchies: race, gender, and class. For centuries, people have asked why oppressed groups so often seem to accept their place. SJT gives us a psychological answer: internalization. When a system of inequality is everywhere, and has been for a long time, it just becomes the background reality. Its values can be absorbed by everyone. This can lead to that shocking phenomenon of outgroup favoritism, where members of a disadvantaged group say they have more positive views of the dominant group than their own. Or it appears as internalized depression, where people adopt the negative stereotypes society has about their own group, leading to self-blame. For example, when women endorse stereotypes that they are less assertive than men, it can justify the gender pay gap by making it seem like a natural outcome of personality, not systemic bias. This isn't a conscious choice. It is the mind taking the path of least resistance to make sense of a world that dealt it an unfair hand. By accepting the system's logic, a person finds a stable, if painful, role within it. To resist is to live in constant conflict, not just with the world, but with the shared reality of everyone around you. Blaming the victim becomes a twisted way to preserve the belief in a just world, even when you are the victim being blamed. So, where does all of this leave us? We've seen how one theory can explain some of the most confusing parts of human behavior. From the burned-out employee defending their toxic job to the persistence of vast social inequalities, the fingerprints of system justification are everywhere. We've learned that this isn't about being smart or strong. It's about a deep, subconscious drive to see the world as orderly and fair, even when it's not. It's a drive that comes from our most basic human needs for certainty, security, and belonging. We've seen how this drive acts like a psychological painkiller, dulling the immediate sting of injustice, but often at the cost of our long-term well-being and self-worth, especially for those at the bottom. It's a hell of a bargain, trading righteous anger for quiet acceptance. So, are we doomed? Are we just puppets of our subconscious, forever fated to defend our own cages? No, the theory itself points to the way out. The first, most critical step is simply awareness. System justification is most powerful when it's invisible. when we mistake its defensive whispers for our own rational thoughts. Just by learning about this theory, by giving this ghost a name, we start to steal its power. Awareness lets us turn our gaze inward. The next time you find yourself defending a system, your job, the economy, society at large, you can hit pause and ask, am I defending this because it's truly fair, or am I defending it because the alternative is just as scary to think about? Is this belief serving me, or is it just serving the system? The point isn't to become a cynic or to assume every system is broken. The point is to cultivate a healthy, critical consciousness. It's about giving yourself permission to actually feel the cognitive dissonance, to sit with the anger and frustration that injustice causes, instead of immediately reaching for a comforting story. That discomfort, that outrage, isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's a vital signal that something needs to change. Believing the system is fair might feel good for a minute, but it's the fast track to stagnation. Real progress for ourselves and our world only begins when we have the courage to admit that the world isn't always just, and that stability isn't always worth the price of our silence. We've talked about this on a huge scale, but the real aha moments happen when we look at our own lives. So, I want to leave you with a question. What bad status quo might you be subconsciously defending in your own life? A relationship, a job, a family dynamic? Drop your thoughts and examples in the comments. Just naming these systems is the first step, and your story could be the one that makes it all click for someone else. Let's get a conversation going. And if you found this trip into the hidden corners of the mind valuable, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. Our goal is to keep untangling the psychology of our world together. Thanks for watching.